What is going on, everyone? It is me, the Lone Bot Wanderer, and we are here with another Alone Time video. The series, of course, where you can get to know me better as a person by asking me questions that I answer in video format. I pretty much have that intro down pat. And today we're answering a question asked by Royal Mutant on my last Alone Time video. He asked the following question: would you ever think of opening a Patreon? And by the way, Royal Mutant, you are an awesome subscriber. I see you on every one of my Let's Play videos, so thank you so much for being you. And of course, if you want to ask me a question for a future Alone Time video and get shouted out in that video, similar to what I did with Royal Mutant, please post that question in the comments below, and I'm going to be looking at those questions for my next Alone Time. So, why have I never opened a Patreon for my YouTube channel? This is a question I get constantly. Like, to this day, I get people asking, Lone, why haven't you opened a Patreon? Lone, I really want to donate to you. Even when I'm streaming, people are asking, Lone, why can't I subscribe to you? You guys keep wanting to give me money, and it's really weird because I still don't feel like my YouTube channel is in a right enough place for me to actually deserve donations or extra forms of income in addition to what I'm earning from ad revenue. But let me explain why I don't actually have a Patreon, and maybe you'll understand. Now, of course, this is never to say that in the future I'm never going to have a Patreon. I don't want to have a Patreon, and it's not that I disagree with the notion of Patreon. I think it's a great way for YouTubers and streamers to earn an extra form of income that can be a little bit more stable than ad revenue. The beauty of Patreon is that you have a set number of patrons every month, and roughly you can determine what you're getting in terms of income from your Patreon. So you could have, let's say, 10 people donate $500 a month to you, and even if one of those patrons drop out, you know exactly which patron has dropped out and how much money you're losing for that month. So it's still relatively a stable form of income, and you can predict your losses and increases in your monthly Patreon income much better than you can with your YouTube ad revenue, because that can fluctuate to the nth degree. It's just incredible how much you can get one month with YouTube versus another month, just because it depends on how many views you get, how many ads people watch, what kind of advertisers are showing up on your videos, how much advertisers are paying Google in the first place. It depends on so many different factors that I don't even understand completely. So that's why I like Patreon. So definitely I'm not against the notion of Patreon. There are actually different reasons why I haven't opened a Patreon, and predominantly there's two. The first big reason is that for a very long time on this channel, I never really solidified my video content. I've always done Fallout 4 news updates, but to be honest, I never thought I could open a Patreon just to do Fallout 4 news updates, because as soon as that Fallout 4 news ran dry, then my patrons would think, well, I gave you money and I'm giving you money for Fallout 4 news updates, you can't provide that to me, so I'm going to stop giving you money. And very similar to the other content that I did, whether it was mod videos, or whether it was my top 5 lists, or whether it was my Story Explained series that I tried for a little bit. For a very long time on my channel, aside from Fallout news content, which I've already discussed, I was always experimenting with different series, most of which fizzled out and just didn't work for me in the end for a multitude of reasons. Whether it was I just didn't like doing that series on a consistent weekly basis, whether it took too long to make those videos because I tended, when I started a brand new series, they tended to be overly ambitious, highly edited videos that eventually I understood that I couldn't do on a consistent basis. But the point being is that before I started doing Let's Plays on my channel, when you look at the series that I actually produced, there are many different series. They never lasted. They were very inconsistent. And because of that, and because I hadn't decided what I wanted my channel to be known for, like Let's Plays, for example, the content that every week I produce, and if people were going to donate to me on Patreon, that's what they know to expect. I never actually had a consistent series, and that's a big problem in terms of Patreon, because as I alluded to before, when you open a Patreon, you are giving certain promises, you're giving certain assurances to people that are donating, or that people that are looking to donate. You would be saying, I'm a content creator, here's what I'm going to be producing on a weekly basis, and with your donations, with your Patreon money, with you being patrons, I'm able to give you this exact content. and I just hadn't decided what I wanted that content to be. I couldn't open a Patreon and say, I'm doing mod videos, because they fizzled out eventually, like my mod overhaul videos. I liked doing them for a while, but eventually I lost interest. Eventually they became way too overambitious that I knew I couldn't produce those videos on a weekly basis. So because I didn't figure out a consistent YouTube series, because I couldn't figure out the videos that I knew that I wanted to do on a weekly basis in the long term, I just couldn't open a Patreon, because I knew once I did, and once I inevitably got sick of the videos that I was doing, people on Patreon would get upset with me because they're giving me their hard-earned money, so they expect something in return, and rightfully so. But now, because I've figured out what I'm doing on YouTube, I'm doing Let's Play content, right? When people look at my channel now, it's very obvious that I'm doing Let's Plays of games. I'm Let's Playing Fallout, Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil, Titanfall 2 is coming eventually as well. So now the situation's very different for me. When I open a Patreon, I can say, I'm the Lone Vault Wanderer, I Let's Play games. If you donate to me, that's what you're getting in return. You know what your money is going towards, and that's not going to be at risk. I'm not just going to chop and change between different video series in the past like I have, because most of the time when people donate to you on Patreon, they're donating not just to help you out, which of course is what they're doing, but also they're donating to help you create certain series. And if they're not getting that content in return, they might become an angry patron, and they're simply going to stop donating to you. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to have that negative stigma with my Patreon. Have this Patreon that promised certain things that ended up under-delivering or did not meet expectations and just put a bad taste in people's mouths. So I didn't want that. I needed to ensure that I had my YouTube video content completely settled. And now, because I've consistently done Let's Plays for over a month now, I think that I'm at that perfect stage where if I did want to open a Patreon, I'd be confident in doing so. I'd be confident in creating certain content that when people donate money to me, they know they're going to get that in return. They know their hard-earned money is going towards something concrete that's going to be the same every week, and that's not just going to fizzle out. So that's the first big reason. I hope that I was clear enough there. But the second big reason, and this is something that is probably peculiar to me, and it's probably me overreacting, to be honest. As you all know, I don't reveal my face on YouTube. I'm a pretty private person. You guys don't know my name. I go by a pseudonym, Lone Vault Wanderer, of course. I don't talk about where I live. I don't really mention what I do for work in any much detail. I'm very much an enigma on YouTube, and I've kept my personal life and my YouTube life very, very separate. And I've gone into detail on that in the past, talking about why I don't face reveal. Again, it's predominantly because of my job and privacy and safety, all those kinds of concerns. And I've been afraid for so long to open a Patreon because I don't actually know exactly how the donation process works. And I could probably easily figure that out by talking to Maddie, who's just opened a Patreon, and by talking to people that actually donate to people on Patreon, just to see how much personal information can be discovered by someone who was interested to do so when you actually open a Patreon. So for instance, the example that I give to people that ask me this question all the time, I don't actually know when you open a Patreon if you need to use a bank account or if you need to use a PayPal email. And in either case, when people donate to you, what turns up in their bank account? What turns up in their bank statement? Say, for example, Royal Mutant, let's take him as an example because he commented today's question. Let's say if he donated to Lone Vault Wanderer's Patreon, what shows up in his bank account? Is it going to show my PayPal email? Because that's giving more personal information about me that perhaps I don't want out in the public. If it's tied to my personal bank account, how much personal information of that bank account is being showed in someone's bank statement when they donate to me? I just don't know the answers to these questions, and I'm only ever going to open a Patreon until I know for 100% certain that no one's going to be able to find out my personal identity through my Patreon in some sort of way. Again, I'm probably overreacting, but you guys know how protective I am of my personal identity on YouTube, and I don't want to keep doing things that are going to risk my real name getting out there and my personal identity, my real life getting out onto YouTube. Because once that's done, there's no turning back, right? I've talked about this. As soon as your name is on the internet, as soon as my name is tied in with Lone Vault Wanderer and people can just Google my name and figure out who I am, as soon as that's out there, there's no going back. So I need to be absolutely fucking certain that that won't happen if Patreon's open. And I know that people that don't show their face open a Patreon all the time, and it seems like it's okay. Like, for example, Gopher. Gopher doesn't show his face, we don't know his real name, but he has a Patreon, and in fact, he gets like $3,000 a month. on Patreon. So it must be okay, but I need to be certain because, for example, if I was to open a specific PayPal for my YouTube channel, you're actually required to give your real name and address to PayPal when you open a new account. They actually require that. Maybe it's different in the US, I don't know. But the last I checked, when you open a PayPal, you actually have to give them that personal information. I can't say my name is LoneVault. I've got to say my real name. And additionally, usually what you do with a PayPal, you link a credit card or you link a bank account so you can get all that money from the PayPal account. There's just so many risk factors that I'm seeing here that, again, I just need to be certain that they won't cause me problems if I ever do open a Patreon. So anyways, Wastelanders, I hope this has been an interesting video for you. Thank you so much for listening up until this point. I would like to ask you, any of you that do donate to people on Patreon, can you let me know about all those things that I mentioned towards the latter end of this video? If you donate to someone like Gopher, for example, on Patreon, what kind of personal information can you gather from a creator's Patreon just by donating and even just by having the site up there? I just don't know that stuff and I haven't looked into it closely, and it'll be good to get the viewpoint from people that actually have experience with the platform. So anyways, that's all from me. Thank you so much again. Be sure to ask more questions for future Alone Time videos in the comments below. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourself, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.